All right, let's talk about logic. It's a word we throw around all the time, right? Be logical. That's not logical. But what does it actually mean to think logically? What is logic, really?
So let me ask you something. Do you think it's possible to reason your way to an answer that is 100% absolutely guaranteed to be correct? Is there a system for that?
Well, to figure that out, we are not going to crack open a textbook. Nope. We're going to put our brains to the test with a fantastic little logic puzzle that feels like it's straight out of a storybook.
Okay, picture this. We're in some faraway kingdom. There's a wise old king, and he's devised a test to see which of his daughters will inherit the throne. But this isn't a test of strength or swordplay. It's a test of pure, unadulterated reason.
So here's the deal. We've got 3 daughters, Guilhermina, Genoveva, and Griselda. The king has 5 pairs of earrings in a box. 3 are emerald, 2 are ruby. He places 1 pair on each daughter, but they can't see their own. The goal? Be the first to correctly figure out the color of the earrings you are wearing. The winner gets the kingdom. Sounds simple, right?
Now, this is where it gets interesting. The king asks Guilhermina, the first daughter. She looks at her 2 sisters, thinks for a second, and says nothing. She can't figure it out. Then the king turns to Genoveva. She looks at her 1 remaining sister, Griselda, but she also stays silent. Finally, it's Griselda's turn. The king blindfolds her, but before he can even ask, she announces with total confidence the color of her earrings.
And that is the big question, isn't it? How in the world did she do that? She couldn't see her own earrings. She couldn't even see her sisters by that point. The answer is that she was using a very specific set of mental tools. So before we spill the beans on the solution, we need to open up the logic toolbox.
And the first set of tools we're going to look at comes from what's known as classical logic. This is the bedrock, the foundation that has shaped so much of how we think about reasoning for, well, centuries.
Okay, first things first, let's get a couple terms straight. Reasoning, that's the process happening inside your skull. It's the gears turning as you connect the dots. An argument is what you get when you take that reasoning and lay it out for someone else to see, either by speaking it or writing it down. So one's the process, the other's the product.
Now, this next one is absolutely crucial. You can have a valid argument that's complete nonsense. For instance, all cars are bananas. My key starts a car. Therefore, my key starts a banana. See? The structure makes sense, but the starting point is bonkers. A correct argument, on the other hand, is the real deal. It's got a valid structure, and its starting points are actually true. And that's the gold standard Griselda was aiming for.
So what's the big idea behind this whole classical toolkit? It's actually super simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. It all comes down to this. Every single statement is either true or false. Period. There's no in between, no kinda true. The Earth is round. True. The Earth is flat. False. It's a binary world. On or off. Yes or no. But, life isn't always so black and white, is it? The real world is messy. What do you do with things that are just vague? Or what happens when you get information that flat out contradicts itself? Sometimes, those strict true or false rules just don't seem to fit. And that's our cue to leave the classical world behind and take a trip to, well, what some thinkers call the logic zoo. If classical logic is the powerful, dominant lion, you're about to see that there's a whole bunch of other strange and wonderful creatures out there, each one built to solve a different kind of problem.
And our first stop is the home of fuzzy logic. This is the logic of kinda, sort of, a little bit. It basically looks at the strict true-false rule and says, nah, I'm good. It's all about embracing that gray area.
I mean, think about it. If I say, this soup is hot, what does that actually mean? Classical logic would make you pick an exact temperature where it officially becomes hot. But fuzzy logic lets you say it's, 70% true that the soup is hot. It just feels more human, right?
So you can picture it like this. Classical logic is a light switch. It's either on or off, 1 or 0. Fuzzy logic is a dimmer switch. It can be anywhere in between. And this is actually super useful in things like AI and computer science, helping machines make sense of our messy, sorta world.
All right, next up in our zoo is a really interesting one, paraconsistent logic. Now, in classical logic, if you find a contradiction, if you can prove something is both true and not true at the same time, it's game over. The entire system just explodes into nonsense. It's called the principle of explosion, and it means you can prove anything is true. It's chaos.
So what this logic does is pretty clever. It builds firewalls. It says, okay, we've got a contradiction over here, but we're not going to let it burn the whole house down.
It allows for A and not A to exist in the same system, which is a lifesaver when you're dealing with huge, messy sets of data that might have errors.
And now for the final exhibit where things get, well, just plain bizarre. We're talking about quantum logic. Physicists had to invent this because it turns out the tiny, subatomic world plays by a completely different set of rules than our big, everyday world.
This is where it really messes with your head. Classical logic has a basic rule. If two things have all the exact same properties, they must be the same one thing. Makes sense. But in quantum mechanics, you can have two electrons that are perfect copies of each other in every measurable way. But they're still two different electrons. Quantum logic had to be built to handle a reality that just breaks our common sense.
Okay, that was a wild tour of the logic zoo, right? But here's the thing about our royal puzzle. We don't need any of those exotic creatures. To solve this one, all we need is our good old friend, the lion. Classical logic.
So, let's head back to that throne room. Griselda's blindfolded. Her sisters are quiet. The entire kingdom is on the line. Let's get inside her head and see how she pulled this off.
Okay, let's break this down. Step 1, Griselda thinks about Gilhermina's silence. She asks herself, under what circumstances could Gilhermina have known her answer instantly? Well, there's only one. If she had looked at her two sisters and seen two pairs of ruby earrings. Since there are only two ruby pairs in total, she'd know hers had to be emerald. But she was silent. What does that tell us? It tells everyone in the room, Gilhermina does not see two ruby pairs. Okay, step 2, Genevieva's silence. Griselda thinks, Genevieva heard that too. She now knows what I know. Now Genevieva looks at me, Griselda. If she saw ruby earrings on me, she could solve the puzzle right then. She'd think, Gilhermina didn't see two rubies, and I see one on Griselda, so mine must be emeralds. But Genevieva was silent too. What can that possibly mean? It means Genevieva did not see ruby earrings on me. And that brings us to step 3, Griselda's conclusion. She puts it all together. Gilhermina's silence told us it's not a ruby-ruby situation for her sisters. Genevieva's silence told us that she is not looking at a ruby on me. Therefore, the only possibility left is that my earrings must be emerald. And just like that, she's won the kingdom.
See? That was pure, classical, deductive logic at work. It wasn't a guess, it was a certainty. Each sister's silence wasn't a dead end. It was a clue. It was a piece of information that allowed Griselda to eliminate all the other possibilities, one by one, until only the truth was left standing.
So what is logic really? Well, it's not just one thing. It's a whole toolbox filled with different tools for different jobs. You've got the hammer of classical logic for problems like our puzzle, but you've also got the specialized tools of fuzzy, paraconsistent, and even quantum logic for when things get weird. The real skill, the real wisdom, isn't just knowing how to use one tool. It's knowing which one to pull out of the box for the problem you're facing right now.